Former President Donald Trump issued more than 140 pardons and commutations during his last 24 hours in office. Most pardons were granted to his friends and political allies, but certain gaps have left some of those people vulnerable to future convictions for their crimes. For more on this, I want to bring in Kim Wehle. She is a law school professor at the University of Baltimore School of Law and the author of How to Read the Constitution and Why. Hi there, Kim. Nice to see you again. So who out of the people former President Trump pardoned could risk being convicted again, and why?
Well, it looks like people like Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, maybe George Papadopoulos, maybe Steve Bannon could be subject to additional indictments because basically, unlike Michael Flynn, the pardon doesn't have this really broad language. For Michael Flynn, it's any and all possible offenses relating to the Mueller investigation. So that would mean the Justice Department can't come back and go over the facts and say, Michael Flynn, we are now going to charge you with something we didn't charge you with before. For the other individuals, Paul Manafort, Steve Bannon, et cetera, the pardons were specific. They were specific to the crimes that they were charged with. And for Bannon, it was a little broader, and offenses relating to a particular title of the U.S. Code. But that means anything that wasn't actually prosecuted to conviction is still fair game. For example, Paul Manafort, the jury was hung on 10 counts in the Eastern District of Virginia. So there wasn't an actual conviction for those 10 counts. A Biden Justice Department could decide to come back and bring those charges again. And the pardon, the scope of the language wouldn't protect him from, at least evidently, from prosecution for charges that weren't covered expressly by the scope of his pardon.
So you kind of answered my next question here, but how would that work, Kim? What could the Biden Justice Department do to still hold some of these people accountable for their actions?
So they could go back, like with Paul Manafort, and re-prosecute him based on the pre-existing indictments for which, as I said, the jury was hung. But also, prosecutors don't throw the book at every criminal defendant. They pick and choose certain offenses based on the facts. They don't want to overwhelm the jury. And also, oftentimes somebody can plead to an offense and strike what we call a deal. So say there's 4 charges in an indictment, they plead to 1, that's the actual conviction. The other 3 would still be fair game, presumably. So if the Biden Justice Department had an appetite to go after, like I said, Papadopoulos, Roger Stone, Bannon, Paul Manafort for other charges, they would not be covered by the pardon necessarily. They might have other defenses, but not that, unlike Michael Flynn, whose pardon is, the sun, the moon, and the stars.
Yeah, help us understand that, Kim. This pardon essentially is what complete protection for someone like Flynn. Is there anyone else that comes to mind with respect to that kind of broad protection that, as you described, Flynn actually has?
Well, Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon for all offenses within a particular time period. That was very broad. So the other kind of pardon we would think about is, here's the specific charge that was brought against you. Some people call these preemptive pardons. Most people just assume that what Gerald Ford did would be legal and constitutional, but it was never actually litigated. So what's tricky about these pardons in terms of, okay, what would the Supreme Court say is constitutional, is there's no way to get it in front of a court unless the government came back later, charged someone with the crime, and in a defense to that crime, they would raise the pardon. And then in connection with the defense, that's how it would get before a court. So we really don't know how, based on particular facts, a court would deal with that, say, Flynn's pardon. I mean, in theory, there would be arguments that maybe it was too broad, and particularly if the president arguably did it with corrupt intent to maybe keep Michael Flynn from cooperating. That could maybe be a problem with the scope of the pardon. Some people believe it's completely unlimited. But like with anything when it comes to the Constitution, we don't know until the current sitting
Supreme Court actually weighs in on it, what is the law? When the court weighs in on the Constitution, that's almost like a footnote to the Constitution. Other than that, it's basically what people get away with and we live with. We don't necessarily have a definitive answer to the scope of preemptive pardons.
All right, Kim Wehle. Kim, as I said, always great to have you. Thank you so much, Kim.
Thank you, Elaine.